Thank you, Vicki. We appreciate Verizon's support of the Chamber and especially this 2020 Women Influencing Business naming sponsor. The Chamber is able to offer great events like today's session due to the generous support of our sponsors. So we want to also thank today's presenting sponsor, which is LexisNexis Risk Solutions. Our gold sponsor is Synovus. We appreciate the tremendous investment that these companies have made in the Chamber and their continued support of women influencing business events. But now it's on to the program. While you tuned in today, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Vonda Wright. And Dr. Wright is a board-certified, fellowship-trained orthopedic sports medicine female surgeon, that's important, that's rare in this world, who serves as the chief of Northside Hospital Sports Medicine. She specializes in sports medicine for patients of all ages and uses the latest in injury prevention, conservative care, and minimally invasive surgery for sports injuries, including disorders of the hips, shoulders, and knees. She's an extensive experience, expert care of athletes of all ages, including us ladies, and her skill levels include high school, college, recreational, professional, and Olympics. So this is important for us as we are aging. This woman, though, is amazing and the perfect lady to speak to us about being a CEO parent. In addition to all of these skills I just spoke to you about, she was an associate professor at the University of Pittsburgh Department of Orthopedic Surgery, sought after keynote speaker, and has published 5 books. Her research has been published extensively and has served as an invited lecturer for most esteemed symposiums all over the world. But here's some fun facts that we will all relate to. She lives in a multi-generational house with her 2 80-year-old parents. She's the mom of 6 kids, 2 of which are living at home right now. Isabella's a 7th grader at Kingsridge, and Louis is 26-year-old who came back from New York but brought his 2 dogs with him when he came. Oh, and let's don't forget her husband, who's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, retired from business, and has decided to take up golf as a new career. So over the COVID break, she became an expert on baking sourdough. And while running the sports medicine division for her own home office, she also is a school teacher. So as you can see, we have the perfect person to lead this discussion. So it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Wright. I look forward to hearing the strategies that you found most beneficial to keep you thriving during this pandemic.
Frida, thank you so much for having me. I hope that all this technology is working and that it's I can multitask for you. But I'm thrilled that you guys asked me back. I'm so happy to speak for smart, savvy women, because I happen to agree with Vicki in that, frankly, we're superheroes because we are managed to leap tall towers in a single bound, and we are able to run faster and jump higher, all while doing our day jobs, right? So I'm thrilled to be here with you and recognizing that despite the fact that you're holding down the workplace, you're probably also holding down the home front. I like in our house to call it curb in versus curb out. We may be able to hold down the world curb out and do everything we're required to by our job descriptions, but the truth of the matter is, many times we're also responsible for curb in, everything that happens within our house. So during COVID, it cannot have been easy for you. And I learned a lot about myself, and I thought I knew everything about myself at this age, but I learned a lot. And so I'm not standing before you as an expert in being a CEO parent, but I sure did learn a lot. And I feel like after this, we could actually start like a water cooler conversation together on Instagram. You text me on Instagram, I'll text you back, or that kind of thing. Because I don't think this is the end of the conversation. But I'm going to now attempt to share my screen. And I only have 7 slides, don't worry. And I would like a part of this to be a little bit of conversation. Oh, so you know what? Someone has to enable my screen sharing because I'm pressing screen share. So I'm going to let that happen. Oh, there you go. Thank you so much. I'm going to click it, share it. Now you see my screen, and I'm going to go here. All right, so I hope that you are seeing my slides now. Is that what's happening? Okay. So today we're going to talk about how to be a CEO parent during COVID. And some of all the things Frida listed for you are there. And I am not an expert in at all of these, certainly surgery, but I am a learner just like you and me when it comes to being a mom, wife, daughter. So let's go and explore this topic. And here at the bottom of the screen, if you can see my arrow, that is how you get a hold of me on social media everywhere. So when we're done, if you have great advice for me, I will take it. Please send it my way. So what does it mean to be a CEO parent? You know, I gave this a lot of thought. Frida had asked me to consider this talk with a great amount of lead time, which I really appreciate because it gave me the ability to think about this. And so when I thought about what does it mean to be a CEO parent, I came up with a different topic for every letter. So hopefully you will be able to remember some of these as you're working day to day. So C in this talk stands for creativity and communication. E is energy and expectations, and O is outsourcing and overflowing. So if we look first at what it means to be a CEO parent, and we're looking at creativity and communication, I think this picture that I pulled from the internet just this morning says everything about what many of us have been probably dealing with at home. This is a young doctor. She's in her fellowship. There's lots of support groups for mother doctors. And this is this young doctor getting it done. She is caring for her little one. She is filling out patient orders. She's sitting in her closet because that's the only quiet place in her house. And you have probably been in this situation, right? So when I think of being a CEO parent, I think if we're going to do COVID and parenting, we're going to think creatively. We're going to think differently. We're going to think about the way that we can be collaborative instead of just swirling around or circling the drain in chaos, right? We've been living with this 6 months. We don't know everything we need to do, but we know a little bit more about what it's like to work at home. We know about wearing masks out in public. We've gotten a little bit of structure that maybe in March we didn't have. So we need to be collaborative, and not just with our coworkers, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but even with our families. Having open communication and really talking about what is going on, what mommy has to do today, setting a daily schedule. Now, it probably won't work for this 2-year-old in her lap, but for school-age children and older children, communicating with them what the day is going to consist of and what our expectations are is not that unlike communicating that to our work teams. Because in the times of COVID, and for you, those of you who lead teams and are bosses, well, we're all boss ladies, I like to say, but for those supervising other people, at this point, we're just going to have to recognize that productivity is going to look different, that there will be balancing, that maybe the meetings that we normally have from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. need to be a little bit rearranged so that maybe we have a 7 o'clock meeting because then somebody else is at home to take care of the little people. Because during this time, to balance what we have to do, maybe we need to use all 24 hours of our day and not just the 9 to 5 we're used to. So for me, that's different thinking. That's pivoting the thought process, which we'll get to. That's examining ways to rebalance work and parenting. But all of this takes what many people have written about, wartime communication. So what does this mean? Well, I'm a strategic leader. You probably hear my clinic behind me. I apologize that, but we are in Northside's very busy orthopedic clinic. But to accomplish work-parenting balance, to think differently, it takes wartime communication. As a strategic leader, my job when I came to Northside was to set a strategic vision for 3 to 5 years that changes every year based on our accomplishments, but I set the vision. My next job, or I would say my most important job, is to choose the very best people in the whole country to be on my team. And they're smart, and I let them go, right? And then I intervene momentarily, but then I let them go. That is peacetime communication. March 13th, I pivoted to wartime communication, which means that at this time in our lives, strategic leaders have to really lean in and really be a part of everyday business at levels that you would have never been in before, and communicate to everyone. So how did that look? Well, at my work, I started calling all staff meetings once a week. We have 160 employees in 14 locations. We have 20 doctors and 5 PAs, and I just started calling meetings because everybody needs to know the plan. Well, that is the same at home. Maybe you have to have daily huddles. Maybe you have to have Sunday afternoon, this is what our week is going to be like. And maybe you've always done that, but maybe now it has to be at a different level. Maybe you have to say to everybody that lives with you, listen, Wednesday or Thursday at 10 o'clock, I have a webinar I cannot miss. And how are we going to accommodate that? That's what I mean when I say wartime communication. But let's look at a few age groups and how you might specifically accomplish what you need to accomplish. Listen, if you want to be like this Dr. Mama and put your baby on your lap and type away, you do that. When my daughter was an infant, I wrote my first book when she was between 0 and 12 months old. I strapped her on in her baby bumpo. All she wanted to be was close to me, and I wrote around her, much like this young doctor is doing. So for small children, what do we suggest? And these aren't all my suggestions. These come from experts that I looked up along the way. But for very young children, if you need to get your work done, burst it, meaning plan bursts of highly productive time. Maybe that's planned around the morning nap and the afternoon nap. Maybe that's planned around the time when you get a family member or a trusted helper in to give you 2 solid hours where you're really highly productive and bust it out. You can also in your house set up stations, much like Montessori school. If you have little stations that your little people can go to and play in parallel to you, they don't know you're working. They just think your computer's a game. So you can be working and they can be going station to station to station in parallel to you. Now, I want you guys to give yourself some grace here when I say, perhaps this is the time to harness the power of digital education. Maybe you've got the 3-year-old who's learning to read. Maybe they need to practice their numbers and letters. And I know we're trying to limit screen time, but if you have got to get some work done, that can be a very collaborative way that they can learn while you're working. And then frankly, maybe there's a really big day and you just have to hire a sitter. You just got to break down and get somebody in the house to expand you. Or maybe they just stay in the backyard if you want a social distance. So those are my tips for the really young kids. But what about the school age kids? Well, the main thing I want to say about school age kids is we are seeing really, really high levels of anxiety in school age kids because they're old enough to know what's going on. They're too young to process it. And so there are a lot of studies, both in professional athlete level, in the business setting, and this is the theme for year 3 at the Northside Sports Medicine Institute. Every year we choose a theme. Last year it was excellence. This year it's called clutch. What this means is routines matter, processes matter. Having the same thing you do every day at the same time in a planned way is known in research in professional athletes and a variety of other venues to decrease anxiety. If you can anticipate what's going to happen, if you can add structure, the anxiety level will come down, behaviors will improve, and performance improves. This is why professional athletes wear the same pair of purple socks every game. Why when I was at the PGA Tour Championship this weekend as the players doc, I went into their workout trailer, which they travel with. The PGA provides them with athletic trainers and physical therapists. And these guys are in there the same time every week. 2 hours before their tee off, they're doing a dynamic warm-up. 1 hour, they're doing this. 15 minutes, they're doing this. That routine decreases anxiety, increases performance. And I'm suggesting to you in your own houses, put the structure back in. This is what was hardest for me. I'm an incredibly structured person. And during the 3 weeks when our offices were purely telemedicine, the thing that drove me the craziest and made me a little bit more snarky and snappy with my family was the lack of routine. So that is my main category for school-age children, and they will respond to that. And finally, for tweens, you know, in my house right now, I've got a 12-year-old who's doing her own hybrid school. And then we've got the 26-year-old who doesn't really, you know, he goes and does his work and never comes out of his office. But for the tween, we need time management. She knows she's got work to do. She's capable of the technology, but I have really had to structure how she spends her time. Do your math homework first, then your science. At the end of the day, let's do our French because that's more fluid and more interactive. So I find in my tweens, they'll get it done, but you need to help structure their day. And finally, when it comes to C, creativity and communication, let's just extend each other a little grace and acknowledge that it's not the same as it was. And frankly, ladies, if you haven't heard it before, I'm going to say it now. We're never going back to the way it was. And I'm not sure I ever want to go back to the way it was. It's going to be different. We're going to discover new ways to function. And let's give each other a little grace. So that was C. E is energy and expectations. I was talking to my daughter this morning about how during this time we really need to focus. We talk about it as getting in the box, right? If you're trying to work at home and there's all kinds of noise going on and there's a lot of people in my house shuffling around, focusing may be as simple as not going to another room or another place, but drowning out the noise. Maybe it puts earplugs in you, but you really focus for a set period of time. Maybe it's 20 minutes and you just pound out the work. Maybe you're focused for an hour, but know that you have to focus your energy in blocks of time. Again, in this category, we structure our day. But the next few points are really important points that I want you to examine your soul about, because so many of us, businesswomen, wives, mothers, partners, community members, we suffer from thinking that we have to do everything. Or sometimes we don't want to do everything, but we think somebody's going to die if we say no. Or we get so racked with guilt when we say no to somebody. Ask yourself, in this crazy time, do you really have to do everything? And will anybody truly die if you say no? It's actually a harder question than just CEO parenting. It becomes a core value. You are worth the daily investment in your health. You are worth being able to say no. Do you have to do everything? And I'm going to tell you the answer is absolutely not. But the next question is, what do you value? So I have this friend, his name is Dr. Frank Schuler. He's an MD, PhD that I trained with at the University of Pittsburgh. And he was on a skyrocket journey to the top of our field. And then for the last 4 years, he's had a life-crippling rare cancer, and he can't practice anymore. And I think he's actually getting to the end of his journey. But he, in his very wise academic way, has written a book reflecting on the lessons he's learned from cancer. And the next few things come from him because he's really evaluating what's important in life. And he's in his book, he says, what do you value? Do you value having clean clothes, or do you value that you cleaned the clothes? I'm going to say that again. Do you value having clean clothes? Or is the true value for you that you cleaned the clothes? Or do you value having nutritious food in your house? Or is the value to you that you made the nutritious food in your house? The argument in my family is I value that we have clean dishes. My husband values that he puts the dishes in the dishwasher because nobody on God's green earth could possibly do it right besides him. To you, it's because I hear a lot of women overwhelmed and burnt out that not only do they have to work at work, but they come home and they have to work at home because nobody else is going to do it as good as them. And the truth of the matter is, that may be true, but why do you have to be the one to do it? If the value is having clean clothes or having nutritious food, does it always have to be you? Because this is crazy time and you don't have energy for everything. And these two last things are really philosophical, dig deep questions that, listen, we have the time to think about now because COVID has changed our schedules. The other question I learned from Dr. Frank Schuler is the win principle, which he poses as what's important now. What is important in the moment? I think prior to COVID, many of us, if we're honest, would say that you lived in the future, planning for the future. What's the next thing you have to do? We slide by our daily routines, not really even remembering what we did in the moment or why we did it in the moment. But his book about what he learned from having cancer for 4 years, and he's a single dad and he has 2 teenagers, he has come to realize that he has to evaluate what's important now and be really focused in the moment. So this is a really important thing for us. And then finally, the last point in energy and expectations is, can we please give ourselves some grace again? We're such high performers. We're type A's. Listen, I am raising both of my hands right now, if you could see me. I am so type A that I did not realize I was this type A, but you have got to give yourself a break. We are not all Martha Stewart. We do not all have to pave our swimming pools and credit cards. We do not all have to bake from scratch. We do not all have to load the dishwasher ourselves. Give yourself a break. Stay in the moment and just let some things go so that you can focus your energy by changing your expectations. And then finally, CEO, parent, I put for O that we need to outsource and become overflowing. And so what does that mean? Well, we talked a lot about outsourcing under E. You don't have to do everything, right? Accept help. When I was a young surgeon and I still had something to prove, there was no way I was going to let anybody help me lift the 300-pound person or help me set up my surgery or frankly, when I was turning in a grant, turn it in for me because I had to be the one to know it was right? But at this point, use the resources you have. Trust the people you've hired to do what you've hired them to do. Number 2 in outsourcing, if you have little people, is share the load digitally. If you have to get on a phone call, just like this picture, I love this picture. Put your little person on a Zoom call or a FaceTime with their grandparents or their aunts or their little friends. That is a great way to get 2 things done at once. You share happiness, you share the load digitally. So I loved that suggestion. And then finally, in this kind of time, we need to have a cup that's overflowing. We're just going to get so burnt out if we are cup half empty. How can we become cup overflowing? Well, I'm doing a lot of research on resilience lately. I've been asked to give several resilience talks on building mental and physical resilience. So I'm reading this book by 2 researchers who talked to probably the most resilient people in the world. Those that were prisoners of war, the ones that lived. How did you get through it? The current Army Rangers, those people who go out and save people's lives in the middle of the night, and then the third group of just regular citizens like you and me who had survived great tragedies, maybe house fires or forest fires or any great tragedies, deaths in their families. And I want to tell you, optimism and overflowingness is something that can be trained. And so here are some ways that I've learned in my research that we can fill our lives with optimism, which actually makes us more healthy. It makes our brain healthy. It makes our bodies healthy. But here are some ways you can do it. Number one, give yourself a mantra. So what's a mantra? It's a little thing you say to yourself, or maybe your office develops one. One of my office coordinators suggested that we develop an office mantra as we progress through this year of being clutch and having routines. So my mantra, I'm going to tell you what this looks like. So my mantra is two parts. It's in boca al lupo, and then I respond crepe lupo. And those of you that heard me last year, maybe I talked to you about this, but so I try to be a marathon runner. I'm not as good a runner as I once was, and I never was really a great runner. I just ran, right? About mile 20, it starts to hurt me a lot. And so the people who are cheering you on at mile 20 are screaming things like, "You're almost there! Great job! The finish line!" And you know, runners know 6 miles to go is not almost there. So I got to dig deep. And I got to pull out my mantra. In boca al lupo means in the mouth of the wolf. In that very moment, I am in the mouth of the wolf. I am about to be crushed. The pressure around me is intense. And then I say to myself, crepe lupo, which means slay the wolf. And I'm not actually talking about real wolves, so don't get upset, dog lovers. I'm talking about that thing that's about to crush you in the moment. For me, it's marathons, right? 6 more miles, but I have trained for 6 months for this. I am going to slay that wolf. For you, it may be the pressures of managing a home, a business, less money, less time in a different way. Come up with a mantra that when you say it becomes a tag for you. So now in any critical situation, when I'm feeling like I need some victory arms or I need a little boost, and if you ever see me doing this, just know I'm not crazy. I'm just practicing my mantra. I go around saying, crepe lupo, crepe lupo, crepe lupo, and it triggers my mind into betterness, into more being stronger. So make up a mantra. It's going to push you through. Number 2, focus on your successes. Recognize your little successes. Sometimes success is so common to us that we only recognize our failures. We don't recognize getting through a great day or making a small deal a success. But because this is a different pace than before, step back and realize a success is getting my team through the next project. A success is keeping an entire office COVID-free. A success can be keeping your children on task while you manage to answer all your emails. Those are little successes. Recognize them and celebrate them. Next, establish an attitude of gratitude. You know, I saw my teenager getting a little bit anxiety-ridden and becoming a little, she expresses herself as a little bit frantic when she's anxious. And of her own, she started journaling and writing down everything that she was grateful for, and she calmed down and she had a different perspective. And I learned from that, right? What are you thankful for today? Thank you so much that I actually have a job to come back to, that I wasn't furloughed at all, that 160 of my staff continue to work because of the really stringent COVID protection things we've done. Practice an attitude of gratitude. It will build your optimism and your performance. Seek out positivity. This is going to sound a little mean, and I don't mean it to be so, but if there are people in your life, even if you love them, that are so pessimistic and so glass half empty that every time you spend time with them, they pull you down, they make you less capable of coping, then 2 things happen. You either stop spending so much time with them, or if you cannot because they're your family or your daughter, seek out positivity, whether it's abundance thinking on the internet, that guy Dyer who does all this abundance thinking, whether it's your favorite pastor, whether it's your girlfriend who cannot be knocked down no matter what the situation, seek that out, because we all need that right now, right? And then finally, and this is my final point here, let's pivot our mindsets. Yes, we're stuck at home, but we are not stuck at home. For the first time in our adult lives, we get to be home more than we thought. And yes, it has its own share of challenges, but I read a book a few years ago about pivoting even our language to we don't have to, we get to. And you know, there's language at Northside that I completely did not understand when I came here, but I can understand it completely now. We say we have an opportunity. You know, when I have something I need to fix in my office, I could go down a pathway of this is the worst thing ever, I've got to fix this problem. No, I say we have an opportunity to serve our patients better. We have an opportunity to provide even higher quality. That meaning works. I mean, that pivoted mindset works. We don't have to, we get to. Getting to work, being stressed out from work is a first world problem. And if we pivot our mindset to we get to, that goes a long way. And so finally, more about the pivot, right? We're going to pivot our mindsets. We're going to be ambidextrous leaders. We're going to have one hand on the past, trying to be operationally efficient. We're going to have one hand on the future, because we cannot be hunker-downers forever. We have to think forward, knowing that we are never going back. And we're going to be ambidextrous, leading our teams with both hands until we fully pivot to the future. Acknowledge that we're not returning to normal. We are pivoting to create new normal, or normal now. We have blank pages. We get to create the things that we might have not have gotten to create. We get to harness technologies that would have taken forever. We stood up telemedicine for 25 surgeons in 3 days. It had taken me 18 months to get the idea floated through all the levels that I needed to. But COVID gave me the opportunity to pivot into a blank page, put 25 surgeons up on telemedicine to serve our patients, and we've done more than 1,000 telemedicine visits so that we stay connected. See the difference? See the way pivoting our mindset can change us? And finally, practice this optimism, because it will give you emotional fortitude. So those are my thoughts on being a CEO parent, because whether we need a little help or we get a little help, I think that we can continue this conversation and be supportive of each other as women in business. And I'm really thankful that you let me come talk to you today. And if you want to continue our conversation, there's my handle on everything, Dr. Vonda Wright.
Dr. Wright, thank you. I learned a lot, and I promise that I'm going to practice an attitude of gratitude.
You always do, Frida. You always do.
But we really appreciate, I know how busy your schedule is, and for you to come join us today we are so appreciative. And so I want to turn it over to the North Fulton Chamber President, Callie Boatwright, and she's going to conduct some Q&A.
Thank you, Frida, and thank you, Dr. Wright. We are so excited to have you back, Dr. Wright, and I loved your comments about wartime communications. I think that certainly was what we did here at the Chamber immediately, but I never even thought about doing that as a family. So it's funny because I consider myself fairly aware, but you saying that, I'm like, what was I thinking? I should have certainly thought about that. And then the comments about a superhero, I think, you know, there's an old book about women having the superwoman complex, and I believe that's true. But even more interesting, I think this has exacerbated it, to your point. And we've got to give ourselves some grace and give others some grace. I think that is one of the things that I wanted to ask you, and I'm going to ask everybody that we've got on. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and we will get those to Dr. Wright, and I'll keep an eye on that so you don't have to, Dr. Wright. But how do you, I mean, there are ways that, we can give ourselves grace or give ourselves some time as a probably a high type A personality. What are the things that let you do that? Like, how are you able to do that? Because I find that hard. I think that's the hardest for me.
Well, I think a lot of us, to get to the positions that we're in, we're perfectionists, right? There's a reason we've been successful. We don't leave details undone. We get everything done. Last year when our department focused on excellence, the mantra that I was trying for everyone to live with was everything matters. To our patients, every detail matters. And I still believe that's true. But in our personal lives, I think grace means, it sounds almost silly to say, but when I'm talking about health, I say that take care of yourself first, because the dishes police do not come to your house and arrest you when you leave your dishes in the sink and take care of yourself, right? So if we elaborate on that and give ourselves grace, maybe you're used to a spotless house that you spend 12 hours a day, or maybe you can't have the person who does that for you now because COVID and you can't have those people in. Give yourself a little grace to have a few dust bunnies, because no one's going to die. And it is not a judgment, right? Women feel so judged when everything's not perfect. But the fact is, I think we judge ourselves. And if your girlfriend comes over because you're in some kind of social bubble and judges your dust bunnies, well, shame on her. Because grace is giving grace to each other too, right?
Yes.
Because we think we have to live up to somebody else's standards. So part of what I've learned over time is when I need for everything to matter, like in the operating room, there is no way, and people that work with me in the operating room know that nothing goes undone in my operating room, right? Because there's a time for that. But when I get home and realize that the dish police aren't coming, or that, I forgot to buy the dog food, and so the dog's going to have to eat hot dogs tomorrow, right? Give myself a break. At work, maybe somebody turned something in not quite as perfect as before because the 2-year-old was sitting on their lap. Well, maybe that's the time to hand it back without a reprimand and say, find an hour to, I get it, it's not you, find an hour to correct this, we can't send it out like this, right? Instead of saying, I would have been tempted in the past to say something like, I know you're better than this, I hired you for a reason, let's step it up. I think now's not the time.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It actually does. No, I appreciate it. I think what you're saying was one of your pieces of advice, the win philosophy, about realizing what is important now, right? So the dust bunnies may not be, I may go home and name my dust bunnies, actually, now that you've given me the permission to do that. So I appreciate that. All right, well, we have a question for you. I don't want to take all of the question time. So from Tiffany Griffith, what are some of the challenges working moms have faced, and do you think they will face in the future, knowing that COVID's going to go on? Maybe job loss, wage disparity, and how do they cope?
So what, I was listening to, maybe it was an economics guy. I listened to a lot of stuff because, Atlanta, you drive a lot, you've got the time. And they were saying the truth of the matter is in the future, we're all going to be poorer. We are, right? Whether we were actually furloughed or just the economy is going to be different. And so how do we deal as working people who really are working, we've had a modicum of success by working really hard, deal with the poorerness? And I got to tell you, I think that's really hard, but I also think that that's just one of the stresses. But how do you deal with a poorerness, right? Well, maybe we find joy in other things than the hot leather bag that I just saw come up on one of my women's groups that, some doctor invented the perfect work bag and I've got to have it, right? Well, it's going to change my life, but maybe not right now. Maybe we can still find happiness by renting the runway, or I mean, these are silly examples, but it goes back to giving ourselves some grace. Recognizing how do we deal with the pressures of COVID in the future? Well, recognizing that I'm not really kidding, you may have to adjust your day so that you know that if you have critical meetings, maybe everybody has to have those critical meetings at 7 a.m. or at 9 p.m. after the babies go to bed or whoever goes to bed. And it just use the 24 hours. Those are ways to decompress that really hard time in the hot of the day when we've got little people at home and we're trying to do our jobs. 9 to 5 means nothing anymore, actually, because as long as the work gets done, who cares when the work gets done, right? So, I mean, those are some thoughts I have to that question.
Yeah, no, and I think agreed that I'm seeing a lot of companies say, that it's not about when you do it, it's about getting and accomplishing it. And so if that looks different because you've got little ones who need to be in school, then that's super important as well, obviously, for all of us. I think that as we look at this time, one of the things that I've noticed among my friends, and it's a question to you if you've noticed as well, I do see, obviously this is a women influencing business event and webinar, but I do see that a number of my friends, their husbands have stepped in this new sort of season, right? Because it looks different. And so there is no pre-described way to handle things. Have you seen that as well?
I certainly have seen it represented.
Right.
I don't know in actuality if it's happening, but you know what? This exact conversation has spurred me to have multiple conversations with my husband, to seek out being on podcasts that have to do with being married to medicine, not the TV show, but there's actually legitimate forums for people trying to figure out how to be married to doctors. And I don't think it's any different for women in business. I mean, for those of you that are unpartnered out there, I would like to give you advice on the kind of partner to choose. I mean, I really would, because I don't think enough young doctors consider what it's going to be like. And so I'm giving a lot of young single doctors advice on, if you intend to have a full-blown career, this is the kind of spouse you need to choose, because we're all living it. It is very, very hard to do both. Now, thankfully, I don't want, if Peter Taglianetti hears this, for me to let the world believe that he doesn't do this. He's more than 50% of every household thing that goes on. But that's because I took my own advice when I chose, right? So do I think it's going on? I see it represented. Do I think that young women planning to partner need to partner well if they want to have a high-powered career? Absolutely. You need to think about it when you're all feeling squishy in love.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that, squishy in love. That's
Mm-hmm.
a new one, and definitely will stick with you. No, I agree, and I think that having that awareness to be able to say, what is it that I want beyond just the squishy love feeling is going to be important as well. So I certainly like that. I so appreciate your time and being with us and spending this time together. I want to obviously be respectful of our time and get everybody, because everybody has to get to their next Zoom meeting at the hour. So we're trying to be very respectful of that. So I appreciate you taking time from your practice, obviously, and your busy schedule to be with us. And I know for me, it's hit home, and I think for all of us. I also want to thank Frida Hardage, obviously also with Northside, for opening our program today. Frida, I really appreciate you co-chairing our Women Influencing Business Committee and being such a leader for this organization, and I know for Northside as well. So thank you for that very much.
My pleasure.
The Chamber cannot offer great programs like this without our sponsors. I'd like to thank Verizon for their naming sponsorship of all of our Women Influence business events, along with LexisNexis, Risk Solutions, and Synovus for their sponsorship of this series. I especially want to thank each of you who took your time out to join us today. The next event in the Verizon Women Influencing Business Leadership Series is scheduled for next Thursday, September 17th, and it is entitled Creative Marketing During a Crisis. You can register online now to hear from our panel, which include Bonnie Malden with the Malden Group, Kristen Andre with Andre and Consulting Group, and Samantha Maxey with Fulton County Schools. This panel is going to be moderated by Loretta Alexander, who's with LexisNexis Risk Solutions. You can also mark your calendar for other chamber events coming up in September. Also on September 17th, you can just spend the day with us. We have an afternoon workshop at 2 o'clock called Tracing Technologies That Will Change the Future. Great for you to understand what's going on right now out there. And then coming up on September 29th is the Wellstar Monthly Luncheon Event, which will feature transportation update from port to perimeter. And of course, the Chamber's annual Golf and Tennis Classic presented by Northside Hospital on Tuesday, October 6th. We have sold out on golf foursomes, but you can still be a sponsor and play. So sign up to be a tee box display sponsor or sign up to play tennis. And today, if you register 3 tennis players, you get a 4th one free. So it's a great day to be on the webinar and hear that info. Please check out all of this information on our website at gnfcc.com. And remember to give yourself a little grace all week this week and into the future. We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.